Welcome to the Pathways to Regenerative Investments. I'm Koen van Seijen, and your host of tonight. I also host a podcast on investing in regenerative agriculture and food since 7 years now, and we've had about 250 episodes where we explore the role of finance and money in this transition. And I think it's safe to say that there is a role for finance and money in this transition, but it's also a tenuous one. It's not easy in the current financial system that's focused very much on extraction to find ways to put money to work in a way that makes sense for farmer, for soil, for local communities, and for investors. So the term is getting definitely hyped. We see regen investment now currently everywhere, but what is it? What can it actually deliver, those terms? And the current terms are almost always about control and extraction. And just to mention another one before we dive in, because we have a great panel of experts here and doers in the space. An interesting tension is time. Most funds or most structures are 10-year horizons, fund horizons, and that is in many cases not enough. But at the same time, that's what investors are used to. So how do you dance that dance of getting enough money in while staying true to the regenerative principles, where time is usually not 10 years and could be a lot more, even though, of course, we are running out of time and there is this urgency. So there's another tension there as well. So with that short intro, I'm very happy to have these four amazing people here with me today. I'm gonna each ask them to introduce themselves and what role, how they are playing that role with money in this transition. And I'm gonna start with Calla, who is on the bottom of my screen, just to kick it off with an amazing hat and glasses. So please, Calla, welcome here and take it away.
I was so hoping I was not first.
Women's first. I can't help it. I'm sorry.
All right. Well, Koen, it's great to be here with you and with everyone else on this production. I am Calla Ostrander, as Koen mentioned, and I am the co-founder of Terra Regenerative Capital. We are a investment platform that provides flexible and regenerative capital to projects in the mid-tier of the supply chain. Our goal is to incentivize market access for farmers because we see a way to be non-extractive in this space by not focusing on farmland or farm lending, both of which can be good, but have historically also caused a lot of trouble in the space in terms of over-leveraging farmers and maybe denying land to folks who want that. So nothing bad about those spaces, but our focus is on providing market access to value-add markets for farmers. And specifically right now, we're focused in North America. So we invest in everything from mills and maybe a slaughterhouse or a dye house to brands that provide aggregation and aggregate products from many small farms in order to sell them into a bigger marketplace, either B2B or B2C. We also have a couple of investments in the distribution area. And again, we see this sort of messy middle of the supply chain as a way for us to make market rate returns. We look at anywhere between 8 and 12%. And for the farmers to gain value and bring that back to their production so they can continue to invest in their own transition to regenerative. And maybe I'll just, let's see, what else can I say? We've made 6 investments so far, and we are starting to raise a broader fund next year, January 1. Terra, my co-founder, her family will be the anchor partner in that. And we are not a traditional VC fund. We don't really see VC as a good fit for this space, given low margins and length of time it takes for anything to grow in agriculture. But we do see that this is not a pure act of charity, although there absolutely is a place for nonprofit money. We are really looking to be able to provide good projects, good money, and leave them an exit on terms that work for them. So the last thing I'll say is one of our other goals is to, wherever possible, help structure exits that land the equity back in the communities where these business and facilities are located. So we look at everything from providing nonprofit avenues for farmers and factory workers to buy in to the equity round at the beginning, and also things like ESOPs and other forms of cooperative ownership as potential exits. So our goal is to not only invest in something that we hope will bring farmers more money and ability to transition towards soil health practices, but also at the end of the day, wherever possible, and where the founders agree that that wealth gets transferred back to, in terms of ownership, back to the community that it's serving. So now I'll just leave it there. Thanks, Koen.
Super interesting, and so many follow-up questions. But first, we're going to go to the other three gentlemen on this call. Otherwise, we're not going to get there. So I want to ping it over to Ian, who we had on the podcast a long time ago, and we should have again. But yeah, we have a long recording history. I'm now going to think when it was, which I might want to find out. But anyway, it's been a couple of years. I'm very much actually looking forward to hear an update here. So Ian, first of all, an introduction for anybody who doesn't know your work and the work of your team, and then we'd love to hear an update. So what brings you to the financial transition space connected to agriculture?
Thanks, Koen. Yeah, great to be here. I look forward to being on podcasts again. And really, my work, I'm Ian McSweeney, and all of my work is focused on the land and focused on recognition that capital needs to be returned to the land, that we need to stop extracting capital from the land, and we need to think about business and enterprise as very appropriate and needed spaces for investment, but the land itself is something we need new models to hold permanently to ensure that everything we're doing on the land continues into the next generation, that everything that's been done in past generations to steward land can continue into next generation, that we can begin to right the wrongs around how we own land, how we came to own land, who has access to land now, and many more issues. And really, I believe, and my work has been focused within a nonprofit land trust structure, believing that and donations and grants are critically needed there, because we need to deflate the value. We need to decommodify land. And so a nonprofit allows the capital come in to reduce that value and then hold permanently, and not simply push down the road for the next transition or next generation that happens, but to move into structures that will permanently decommodify land and permanently provide 99-year access for farmers, farm businesses, food enterprises, community stakeholders. So that's my work. I co-direct the Farmers Land Trust with Christina Villa, and we're focused on creating these nonprofit common structures to hold farmland with communities, nonprofits, land trusts, farmers, farmland owners around the country, and seeing the real growth and the real need for this work. So great to be here. Great to have the opportunity to share on my work and connect with all of you.
Super. And then over to Jesse, who has a beautiful background, and also is on farm, so that definitely helps. So Jesse, what brings you here today, and how does money and finance plays a role in your transition work?
Well, thank you, Koen. I'm really excited to be here, and honored to be here with Calla, Ian, and Peter. I'm wearing a few hats in this conversation. It would seem I am a shepherd. The sheep you see behind me are on Studio Hill. We are a savory hub. We teach holistic management. We help farmers think holistically and get started and transition. And I am we have benefited here from investment into regenerative ag, which I could talk a little bit more about later, but in that we are a borrower with Steward. And they helped us expand tremendously, both our education and all of our education, agritourism, and livestock production enterprises. And but today I'm also now the VP of marketing at Steward, which I'm very happy to be and honored to be. It is a thrill to help move capital to farms and enterprises that really are doing great work on the ground, regenerating ecosystems, communities, economies. To date, Steward's community lending model has moved $27 million into the space, which has been, direct from people who want to fund regenerative agriculture to the people who are doing the work of regenerative agriculture. And it's been tremendously rewarding to be a part of that. So I'm here today and grateful to share that work with you. Thank you for having me.
And then last but absolutely not least, Peter, definitely take it away.
Thanks very much, Koen. Thanks for having me this morning. I'm Peter Pontikes, and I'm with Biome Capital. We're a relatively young and new investment fund. Really, our goal is to find those pathways to get capital into the regenerative agriculture space. And there's a number of things there, looking for investors that are interested not only in, wanting to earn a return on their capital, but finding ways to make that capital, useful and significant in terms of improving our food systems broadly. On the investment side, primarily, I shouldn't say primarily, but we're looking at a number of different things, but primarily anchored around farmland. And I think when we think about how that looks, we don't want to be kind of a traditional farmland fund that simply goes out, buys land, and then rents it to a farmer. That's exactly what we don't want to be. We want to be partners with our farmers, which means that we'd like to buy land alongside the farmer partner, operate it together, and share in whatever returns we can generate. And at the same time, finding ways that we can apply regenerative techniques to that land and improve yields, improve soil health, improve outcome. And so broadly, that's kind of what we're looking at. We're also interested in things like the messy middle that Calla already mentioned. There's a lot of work that can be done on the infrastructure side. CPGs is another area that we're interested in. And then broadly, things like technology and how that can improve the farm situation and outcome. And so we're thinking broadly, but again, anchored in farmland and anchored in working with farmers directly as partners, and really with an eye on developing ecosystems in local areas and those deep relationships with farmers and communities. So I'll pause there and hand it back on.
Super, thank you. And a question to all, but we can go around, or whoever feels, so I don't put people on the spot. Whoever feels most the urge to answer first, like the term, I think, regenerative investments. I don't know if you've already seen it popping up on conferences, and I wouldn't say billboards, but let's say we're going to see a lot more of that. It makes me it's a bit itchy, and it's interesting at the same time that the term gets hyped so much. I think it was before a bit impact and sustainable, but it really feels like the next term. When you hear that, what beyond the hype and the regen washing, let's say, that's happening, what comes to mind in your work that, of course, you cannot tackle all the issues with the current financial system in one product and then it's all perfect and we're there. But if you had to name one example that your work really makes it clearly more regenerative, I'm not saying it is regenerative, that's going to be a whole different discussion, but clearly distinguishes your work from the very extractive financial system most farmers have interacted with, most people have mostly interacted with, and honestly, we're mostly part of. If you had to pick one thing, one tension you're trying to solve, what would that be? Whoever feels called to answer definitely can just unmute or raise your hand, unmute, and go for it. Go ahead, Peter.
One tension that we do see, I hesitate to call it a tension, but one thing that we do tend to see is how we think about time horizons. And one thing that, I've had some conversations with farmers, and, the conversation was around land values and how we think about kind of what a fair value for land is, what kind of return we can expect to earn over a longer period of time. And our investors, would tend to think of a horizon of up to 10 years. conversations with farmers, 10 years is short, obviously, and they're very willing to buy land at current prices, even if they think it's high, because they're not going to hold it for 10 years. They're going to pass this on to their kids. In their minds, the horizon is infinite. And so one of the tensions that we see is, how do we bridge that gap between what investors might be looking for and how a farmer thinks about a horizon, right? And fundamentally, that's a huge disconnect, right? And so we're thinking about how do we mitigate that? How do we find a solution that helps both? And that could involve things like finding.
Any thoughts? Because I'm thinking many people will take notes now.
Yeah, it's a tough one, but I mean, ultimately, how we approach it is we want to be able to see the farmer at the end of the horizon. One of the discussions we have is, okay, if you guys are only going to be here for 10 years, what happens after that? And really, we want to be able to structure something where there's a structure where the farmer can eventually buy back into that land or own that land, right? And so that exit scenario is really, really important, not just for the investors, but obviously for the farmer, and more broadly for the community that they're living in, because the farmers want to own their land as much as they can. That's part of who they are, and they want to be able to transfer that down to the next generation. So thinking about how the exits happen, thinking about how the farmer buys back the land, maintains control and ownership of that land, that's really important in the conversations that we're having.
Catalyze, you also unmuted, I think. Or Ian, you want to jump into that? Go
Yeah,
ahead, and then we go
I'd love to. Yeah, just jump in, kind of to expand.
Time horizon is an interesting one for you. I think you mentioned 99 years. So that's
yeah, interesting to think of that time horizon and just the regenerative investment. And so for me, the regenerative investment comes down to kind of for who and for what. And so in our work, it's raising philanthropic capital to reinvest land back into community, back into farmers' hands in a longer term horizon. Because it is a longer term than a 10-year fund investment horizon, and it's multi-generational. And at the same time, most next generation farmers are not caring for the family farm. The aging out of farmers without a next generation outpaces next generation farmers 5 to 1. So what to do with those exiting farmers that don't have a next steward, especially those that have had fund investment to improve soil stewardship, ecosystem, other metrics of great success? Like, how do we mitigate the risk of that being lost and build assurances that'll carry forward for generationally, regardless who the owner, farmer, operator is on the ground? But that kind of really long-term horizon that we need to rebuild soils and ecosystem in our work. So thinking about an ownership structure that can help protect and ensure that is really important.
And you're finding the only capital until now, only between brackets, but the only capital until now wanting or being able to unlock that is philanthropic.
Well, a combination. We work with investment and philanthropic capital. Primarily, the investment capital is going to be for the enterprises and the systems that are built on the land that can generate returns that are non-extractive. But there is some balance of investment capital to be used in land transactions as well, but primarily philanthropic capital for the land acquisition side.
Catalyze, you unmuted before.
Yeah, I think it's so important what both Ian and Peter are doing in terms of ways in which that ownership can stay with the families and the people and the communities who are tending the land. I think I've even seen some examples where there are a couple of just beginning trusts that are buying back land for Indigenous folks. And really this movement of giving ownership and providing capital means or capitalistic means for ownership to lie with the folks who live, whose livelihoods are on the land and who are stewarding the land, I think is just so central to the challenges that we find ourselves in today. Homelessness, food security, land degradation, all of these issues, I think, really fundamentally come back to how we relate to the land and ownership of the land, and how that either props up the economy, because it can do so in multiple ways, some of which continue extraction. And I think some of the examples today on the phone or on the whatever we are, Zoom, help begin to restore and regenerate. And that's what the World Economic Forum defines regenerative capitalism, is like that it gives back, builds more, and creates more wealth than it extracts, exploits, or destroys. And that's the same thing as regenerative agriculture, right? That you employ practices that restore more energy and health to the soil, to the land, to biodiversity. And I think it's the same thing. It's the same thing with capital. You have to look at, does this capital make this place better? Does it help the people have more prosperity who live in this place? Does it give them more long-term prosperity, which can often be tied directly to ownership? So for us, we stay away from the land space, but we really try to invest in that connectivity to the market. And that's a place where I think we see a lot of people, in terms of the tension we see a lot of people who are calling what they're doing regenerative, but if you're driven by a need to do that 10-year exit, there's only so much you can do. And if you're driven by VC level returns, there's only so much you can do. And that means that you're going to predominantly focus in tech. And again, tech is a place where ownership does not reside with the farmer or the land steward the vast majority of the time. And no knock on tech, but I think that we have to look a lot more at physical assets, physical infrastructure, and market access.
And then, like, you're going out now in January, it depends when you're watching this, maybe you're already out. And that's, I think, the tension as well, like how willing, how flexible are investors? Because as long as it's your own wealth you're putting to work, and that, of course, you probably could have more flexibility. But as soon as you hit the market between brackets, then like how funky you can be is sort of dominated, like how you can move. Like, have you had many conversations already to explore like how these kind of exits, for instance, I'm referring to Calla, the exits to the community, how that falls within the investor community? Is there interest in that? Is there skepticism? Like, what kind of funky terms can you come up with, or what might be too funky?
I think that right now, as we get started, it's a special group. These are folks who are looking for a certain impact with their investment. This is not necessarily someone on the market. They can make a great amount of money in a CD right now. I mean, if you're just trying to maximize your dollar, or you're a high risk, high return person, this is probably not the space for you. So I think, we're doing a lot of work with impact investors and with folks who are really have a mind towards either, food security or legacy or regeneration. And who are willing to, they're okay with 10 to 12%. This is something that they want to make a return on, but they're okay with that money being locked up for a good period of time, as long as they're able to get that back. So, and I'm not delusional here. Most of the capital in the market is not in this space. However, I think that there are enough of us in the impact world and in this space that we'll be able to put enough together to get started, to prove it out. And then as it grows, what's so wonderful about a regenerative space, right? This is one of the principles of regeneration, is that it builds more wealth in that space. And so I actually think that if we're successful in investing in the economy and the ecosystem that supports these things in a regenerative way, that our returns are actually going to get better over time. Instead of depreciation, we're going to see these types of deals being worth more in the future. And that is dependent on a certain lofting of the space. But I think, we're realists to start. There are some family offices, there are some impact investors that are willing to take that risk because they want to see this grow. What's wonderful is as it grows, I think there's going to be more opportunities for people who are maybe more along that spectrum of I want my money to do good, but I still want my money back. So it's a phased growth. You know, this is something that's living. It's going to change. It's going to build.
Super, thank you so much. And then Jesse, you both at Steward and of course the studio here, like how do you apply regenerative practices? I don't have to ask because behind you can see it with the sheet, but when somebody asks, well, what is this buzz around regen investments, and what do you go to answer normally for people to wrap their heads around that?
Well, I think Calla gave a great explanation that I think it provides more value than it extracts over time. And the question I think is, how do we define value? And how do we, I think the biggest tension I feel in the space right now, and since the beginning, in terms of regenerating, investing in regenerative, is what is a butterfly worth? What is clean air worth? What is soil health worth? These are qualitative values that we all recognize but can't quantify, and the market wants to quantify them, and I don't know that we should quantify them. I don't know that we should monetize nature, but these are all values these are all things we value, but the market hasn't figured out a way to assign a dollar value to it. And again, I don't think that we should. I don't think that's the right way, but I think one of the cool things that the community lending model does is it puts the lender usually in the same region as the regeneration project. You know, I value clean water near my home more than clean water on the other side of the planet, you know, so like the value becomes more clear to me as investor. And I think that that's a way that we can make that connection of value more concretely. But I also view this, as Calla was saying, as this work that I'm doing on the farm here is capital accumulation, but it's ecological capital accumulation. Like my soil is getting stronger, my grasses are getting stronger, my sheep are getting stronger every year, and they're becoming more and more and more productive. So my economic bottom line is becoming better and better and better every year because the ecosystem is growing more abundant, and I'm able to you know, make a better living off of it. But it's a 25-year, 30-year, 40-year process. In some parts of the world, it's 100 years. So like, how do we invest in ways that have that timeline if we're just valuing things economically and not considering all the holistic picture?
And we only have like 50 minutes to correct this. Most of it we already used up. Now that's a huge overarching theme. Do you want to value nature? If we don't, it gets destroyed. If we do, we undervalue it. And how do you get around that dance? Plus, a market wants us to value everything in a dollar and not even in different amounts, of course, which is not something we're going to tackle here, I think, unless somebody has an easy go-to answer there. Ooh,
well,
Calla
I just want to say it's not that much of a mystery. In the US, we do value it. We value it in the 6th largest spending packet in the federal government, which is the Farm Bill. Like, it actually does have a dollar value in the form of...
And in Europe, it's the largest spending we do.
Yeah, so I actually think socially, it's important to recognize that we do value agriculture, and we understand, at least historically, that it hasn't been the best fit for a market-based economy the way we've had capitalism acting in the past. I think as we evolve capitalism, we can step into this space a little bit more, but it's important to understand that it is valued. It's valued socially, and how much We have a guaranteed bailout for farmers. It's called crop insurance. We have guaranteed markets for farmers. They're commodity markets. It's just that those things are only applicable to certain commodities that are highly, highly monopolized by very large corporations. And if you're trying to farm outside of that system of fence-to-fence single commodity production, you have to fend for yourself in a market that doesn't value you because the social benefit is actually just being directed to a certain type of agriculture. So it's not like, oh wow, we don't value it. It's like, no, we do value it. Like you just said, Koen, it's the largest spending for your government. So it's that value is coming in through government and not through necessarily the open market, although the way that money comes in provides huge markets. Like that's what Cargill and Bayer are based around, as these, and Wells Fargo, and the amount of money that banks have in debt to farmers. Like this is all based around those federal subsidies. So I just think it behooves us to be a little bit more, have a little more acumen when it comes to the economics of agriculture, and not try to compare it to the economics of, say, tech. Or a single commodity, because it does have a much more shared value. Than my iPhone is valuable to me, and in as much as you can call me, it might be valuable to you, but it's not really valuable to you. But the food that Eat Jesse grows is going to be valuable to you in a different way. So anyway, I just want to let's just call that out.
And thank you for that. And I want to be conscious of time, of course, and make sure we have time for a round of more personal stories, which I know in some cases, but not all, is what was your own, let's say, regenerative catalytic moment? Could have been a moment or a slow realization. Like how did you maybe roll into this space? How did you fell into this space? Or did you walk into the space? How did you wake up in the space? Maybe in some cases, what was your entry into, let's say, the regen movement? We can definitely call it like that. And I will leave it up to you. Who wants to go first? Like who feels the strongest calling? We're all looking at each other. Jesse, go.
I'll go first. Well, I had two moments that really defined my journey. One was I fell in love with a girl, and she had a farm, and I found myself a farmer. Unfortunately, shortly after our wedding, her aunt, who had run the farm for 40 years, got cancer, very aggressive cancer, and passed away. And we, up to that point, and the farm had been very, conventionally managed, chemicals, atrazine, Roundup, glyphosate, tillage, patented seed, and all that kind of stuff. And we were so scared by the cancer that took one of our heroes that we stopped spraying anything and everything, and quote unquote went organic, and thought we were doing all the right things. And the next spring, the fields that were lush and green for 40 years were sand pits. They looked like they were just decimated. They weren't even dead. There was no death in them. They were sanitized. It was remarkable to see, and it broke our hearts. And we stumbled onto, after years of losing crops and 3 jobs off the farm to support losses, stumbled onto holistic management, the Savory Institute, brought animals back to the land, and were able to start regenerating the dead ecosystems and cycles of nature, and got very far in that, just kind of feeling our way through and learning all we could from everybody who would talk to us, and learning the art of humility in a complex system, which was an invaluable lesson. And so we got to a point where we were ready to expand. Our neighbor, who had 50 abutting acres, called and said, "Hey, listen, I've had it with Vermont winters. I'm moving to Florida, and do you want to make an offer on my property?" Which we'd always wanted, like secretly. We had been, that was in our wish list, was to acquire those acres, because it would have allowed us to expand significantly. And so I met with every bank I could get a meeting with. I met with 5 banks on the Hill. We took tours, we did presentations, we did slide decks, we did underwriting. And then with a day to my deadline to make an offer, the last bank standing said, "This is great. The community needs it. you have the track record, you have the knowledge, you have the expertise. It's going to be great, and we can't fund you because we do not participate in ag. And I said, this week, I would have loved to know that a month ago. And you know, on a weird universal moment, I get a text from a cousin of mine who says, hey, I've just interviewed with this company named Steward. They make money available to regenerative ag projects. Do you have anything you want to talk to them about? And lo and behold, you know, 6 months later, we own the land. My mortgage is with 350 people who support regenerative ag, and not with one giant entity that doesn't care a whit about me. And so it was those two moments: one, witnessing the death of a place that I love, and two, and its need for regeneration. Two, traditional money isn't coming into this space. It's too bound up by you know, things you all wrestle with and understand better than I do. But so I understood it, but I understood there was a need for something different. So
thank you so much. Really good way to kick off this final round. Go ahead, Peter.
My journey into regenerative agriculture, I describe it as it happened very slowly and then very quickly. And very slowly because I spent 30 plus years in finance and investment, and primarily in public markets, in public equities and derivatives. And I knew nothing about agriculture. And I grew up on the prairies of Western Canada, surrounded by millions of acres of farmland. And like I said, know nothing about agriculture. And so, you know, fast forward to halfway through 2020, and I'm contemplating retirement from what I've been doing for 30 years, and not knowing exactly what I was going to do next, but also knowing what I didn't want to do next, which was more of the same that I'd already been doing for 30 years. And I get a call from a good friend of mine that I used to work with saying, how would you like to help out on a project? I hear you're not working right now. And I said, sure. And it was basically starting up Biome Capital. And he says, you know, we just need some help with putting together some data on farmland and statistics. And I think you like doing that kind of stuff. And I said, sure, I'll help you out. And so I started with that, and then slowly got more and more involved and started learning more about agriculture. And then I think a big turning moment, it was, and Jesse doesn't know this, that this was a big turning moment for me, but I actually visited Jesse on his farm in Vermont. And we spent a couple of days, and we walked the farm, we toured around the area, the community, he drove me around in his truck, looked at different farms, you know, walked his own farm, and he's like, you see that piece of land over there, and you know, you see those chickens and you see those sheep, and here's how we corral the sheep and move them around, and look at that strip of grass, you know, look at what we did over there. And to me, that was a huge turning moment, and that's where it became very quick. And I think, you know, there was a couple of things that kind of came away, I took away from that. And I think one was just how difficult, I mean, what Jesse was doing is not easy. It's a very difficult thing to do. It's a difficult thing to be a farmer. It's a difficult thing to regenerate land. And it's a huge, huge commitment. And I was just so impressed with what he was doing. And I think secondly, just not just difficult, but just how important what he's doing is, and what, you know, farmers are doing for the food systems, for their communities, for soil health. You know, the way Jesse was thinking about, you know, regenerating the land on his farm, creating better outcomes for not just for himself but for the community. All that stuff just really struck me, and just how necessary this all is. And so from then on, you know, I think that was almost 2 years ago, actually, that I was at Jesse's farm. And from then on, I've continued to work with Biome and continue to work on different projects. But for me, that was the journey. So like I said, very slowly, but then very quickly.
Super. Thank you so much for that one. And then Calla Rose, you want to go first, or Ian? Who wants to? Ian, go ahead.
Sounds good.
They're both pointing at each other. Go ahead.
So yeah. For me, there's been two kind of experiences in life that have really brought me to here. The first, when I was growing up, I didn't grow up in a farming family. My parents had a backyard garden, so was connected to agriculture, gardening in that way. But we were surrounded by 1,500 acres of kind of both pristine natural area and farmland that, as I was a very young kid, was bought by a dairy farm that was at the stage of going into kind of both industrial dairy farm production growth and also acquisition of a gas station convenience store. And so I grew up watching both this gas station convenience store spread up everywhere around the state region, and this land just be completely degraded and, used to just cycle the excess manure and grow silage corn and try to extend acre to acre, road to road, decimating wetlands, waterways, anything in the way to really just maximize production on the land. So saw that kind of transition of agriculture in my backyard, saw kind of measures to stop that, the town, then the state. Ended up going to the US Supreme Court, and it changed the Clean Water Act to protect inland waterways that had not been protected before that. So watching that kind of as I grew up in those different stages of reality for that really just impacted me in many ways. And I felt from that time period like a distilled belief that came out was we're so disconnected from the land. And that's a fundamental issue. And until we find ways and support ways that exist to reconnect with the land, we're not going to solve so many of these other systemic issues. Later on in my career, about almost 20 years ago now, got connected with and started to work with the Temple Wilton Farm, which was one of two founding CSAs in the modern CSA movement in the US, that now has 14,000 plus CSAs of all different types for food and agriculture and different enterprises and products. But watch them as a farm started in 1984 around this vision and impulse, struggle to hold land. They never owned the land they were on. It took them 27 years. And our collaborative work to raise the money, both investment capital and philanthropic capital from the community, partner with a community loan fund, partner with their CSA community, and do a lot of outreach to raise the capital to secure the land in a local nonprofit and secure a 99-year lease for them. So that kind of the growth and need and importance of that CSA model for all it is for farm businesses and stewardship of land and relationship to food is so important. I saw there that the need is also to expand that to land. Communities need to own land, communities need to invest in land, communities need to hold land for regenerative agriculture. And that's been my work ever since.
And then last but not least, Calla Rose.
I resonate with what Ian's saying about seeing land shifts as a child and watching that and being very impacted by that. I think for me, I was in the climate change space and the city and county of San Francisco, and we did, I was in charge of inventories for carbon footprinting, and I did over 5 years, we did 5 different types of inventories. So your standard geographic, consumption, second, what I guess you call scope 1 and 2, and then scope 3, and then full life cycle inventories. And at some point I had counted everything, every possible way you could count it. And I just realized that I started looking for places where the things I was counting like this could not only go down, but could reconnect. And I started looking at things in cycles. And at the same time, I also this is going to sound strange for someone in climate, but I actually think it's pretty common. I wasn't very familiar with biogeochemistry. I was very familiar with the sort of pollutant-based framework for climate change and not for how the planet actually works, which is how it moves large elemental cycles to create life, which is biogeochemistry. And I had a simultaneously an accident where I was out of the office for about 1.5 years on medical leave, and I got to be outside a lot. And it kind of, all these things came together. And it was like, I was outside, I was seeing nature, I had understood cycles before, and I was getting to understand the science of it. And it just moved me wholeheartedly and fully into this space of regen ag. Climate, you're very broad. You have to kind of know everything about a little bit of everything. And it was a very physically enjoyable sensation just to move completely in this direction of like, I can be here, this feels good, and to begin to understand life and how humans can be not just bad for the planet or do less bad for the planet, but how we can do more good, because we're going to live, we're going to eat, we're going to want to go to Greece in the summer to lay on the beach. Like, it's about having a good life. And I think that the wonderful thing about regenerative principles and stewardship is that you can live that life and know that you are also living in ways that are benefiting the future generations and the restoration of the planet. So I had a lot of confluence of events that sort of led me into this space about 10 years ago. And I honestly don't see myself going anywhere else.
Thank you so much for that. And I think to wrap up, if we have a few more, if something comes to mind, like ideas or tips for people wanting to find their pathway or moving into this space, I think I would kick it off with absolutely doing what Peter did, is to visit a farm, or depending on where you are, go to Vermont. But to spend time on farms, to soak it in, especially if your path is not, let's say, land-based at the moment, you don't have access to land, or you're not farming. There are a gazillion other things to do, to be built, from processing all the way from branding to finance structures. Like, everything has to be rebuilt sort of in this transition, but it all starts on land. So definitely reconnect with that would be my kickoff. Any other things to add to that from any of you before we wrap it up here? Any tips you give to people that say, oh, I would like to learn more, I would like to know more, I would like to do more? That's the better thing. I would like to do more. What do you tell people when they ask you that? What should I do?
I think one thought, it completely starts on land, and it also starts in community. So I think for myself, and maybe all of us or many of us, deep learning comes when we're on land and we're connecting with other people and having conversations and seeing that direct engagement and sharing and investment and return play out and learn from that. So the balance of kind of engaging locally and engaging in a broader way is really important, and to lean in locally where possible.
Any last thoughts, anybody else, before I wrap up?
Just farm tours. Like, if you can get out and get on a farm, or pay a farmer to take your kids out and go with them on the day for class, or, I mean, farmers are not there to teach you everything, but a farmer is usually very proud of what they do, and finding and supporting a farmer in your community or a land steward in your community, whether that's in the forest or with a river or a little creek. I used to have a creek that ran by my house in Berkeley. It ran on the sidewalk, but I loved it, and I talked to my neighbors about it. So, I think it's about finding something in nature that you love and learning about it, and learning about it with other people, because that's where it really is the most rewarding.
I usually say the same, get out there and fall in love with the land. But since that's been covered, I'll say read Wendell Berry, read Vonda Nishiva, read Fukuoka. There are great ways to fall in love in your living room too.
Yeah, 100% agree. I think it's about education and just building that awareness. And I think so many of us just think our food comes from Costco, and we don't think much more than that. But you got to get out to see the local farms and go to the farmers markets and start talking to people, and just become more aware of where food's coming from. What are the actual systems that happen behind that? and that really will start to open people's eyes, I think.
I think that's a perfect end. I want to thank you all so much. Thank you to Farmers Footprint for hosting this conversation. You will find a lot more in the description below. I'm just pointing below, but you will see that in the video. This is part of Giving, I'm going to say Thursday or Tuesday, I never remember, of Farmers Footprint. I want to thank my guests of today here to make time in their very busy schedule, changing the food and the financial system, let's say tackling two giant beasts at the same time. And thank you so much for the time today, and hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. So if you listen to this, definitely get out. Get out after this. Close your laptop, your screen, or wherever you're viewing us, and make sure you get some soil under your feet. Probably barefoot is better. So thank you so much for your time today, and see you next one.